Hey, this is Steve with Dabble, and this is another episode of our experimental series that I'm referring to now as Dabble with Experts. And we talk with an expert and have an expert teach us something that is relevant to voice and bot development. And today I'm joined by Joe Jaquinta, right, Joe? And and we're gonna jump into a conversation around voice design and voice patterns. And Joe's been he's been one of the pioneers in this space and done more stuff than I could list. But I'll let Joe do a quick intro, and then we'll jump into the conversation from there. So Joe, thanks so much for sharing your time.
No, happy to be here. I mean, as you said, we're a small consultancy firm, and one of our mottos is do hard things. So our kind of approach to the Alexa platform is how far can we take it? Okay, in the sense of taking the one dimension of that is what can we do, and you can do some crazy stuff, but the other part of the dimension is what should we do? Because you can do some crazy stuff that is completely useless. It's like it's like you can do that, but that's not a good use case. It's not a good model, whatever like that. So by pushing the envelope, we want to push the envelope to do as much as we can, but also try to find, okay, what's the best way to do that so it's still an experience that the user wants to partake in.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying before we started recording that I got into this stuff, interested pretty early, and it seems like you've always been there on those Slack groups and out putting stuff out. And I read your book early on. What was it about this that that attracted you to voice? What was it about voice that really caught your attention? Because obviously you've spent a lot of brain cycles thinking about this stuff.
Well, honestly, it was the design challenge. It's like, I'm a software engineer. I am not a designer. I'm a software engineer. I've worked with some really good user experience designers, and they really impress me. I'm like, how do I make this usable? And they're like, oh, do this. And I'm like, that's so much better. Why couldn't I think of that? So when I heard about Alexa and it came to voice, I'm like, wow, it's like all we can do is talk to it and it can talk back. That's like, there's none of this stuff that you have to make it, discoverable and usable and to optimize the user experience. So it's like the same. So I'm looking from the point of view, there's all this stuff I've learned from designers. It's like, okay, what does the user want to do? You want to, make it with their tasks and all the processes they use, but the solutions were going to have to be different. Okay. Yeah. And so that's what intrigued me at the beginning. Is like, okay, how do we do UX for this sort of device? And again, it's been ongoing. It's been 3 years, and I'm still, pushing the boundaries, finding new things, and finding lots of things that don't work, going from there.
So you have some opinions, and we've gone back and forth online on this, and I know you have with other people, and it's always fun and mentally challenging, I think, at times to think through these things. But we had a conversation earlier today about just do we try to move to where the conversation truly is to most humans just like having a conversation with another person? Is that where we want to be with this stuff? Or and I know your answer, so I'm kind of setting this up, but give us your thoughts. Like, what's your viewpoint on this? Is that where we should be? Is that the best for somebody new coming into this? Is that what they should be focused on? Is having an experience that mimics a conversation with a human?
Well, I always have opinions, yes. Everyone wants Jarvis. Okay, everybody's seen the Iron Man movies, and there's this, you talk to it, it talks back, you have witty repartee with it, etc., like that. Right. This is what the users want. And the standard design principle is like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, it's like people know how to talk to people. If you make it the conversation like a human, then you don't have to train the user. The user can just relate to it and go on with it. Okay. We don't agree with that. Okay. And we take a different, and there's a couple of reasons. Okay. One of it is just technically it's just not possible. Okay. With the state of the technology as is, and in my challenge I give to people is like, okay, take the script from Iron Man and take any exchange between Stark and Jarvis. Write it
Mhm.
down. Now, write an algorithm, or how would you design an API that presents the information that the human is saying to a software interface that it can act on it and conceivably give the response that Jarvis gives. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's a very, very hard problem. Okay. And it's very far removed from anything we have today. I mean, Amazon did this like, $500,000 challenge to come up with something to have a conversation. And, there were results, but none of them was like even close to that. So if
That was like the 20-minute conversation challenge, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And, they were, I mean, it's good to have these things. I think it progressed things, but I think it does underline the fact that we're far way away from just one of us little third-party developers being able to solve this problem. So,
Yeah.
and the second thing is that Alexa or Home is not a person. Okay, it is a machine. It is a tool.
Mhm.
Okay, that if it's going to be part of our life, its purpose is to get things done. Okay, it's like a pencil. I don't have a conversational pencil about writing. Okay, I use it to do things. I use my computer to do things, to achieve things. I mean, and they're even more becoming an appliance, sort of thing like that. So that's not, I mean, right now it's new, it's novel. I'm sure when, the teleprompt systems came up on the phone, people said please and thank you to them.
Mhm.
We don't do that now. We bark orders at them. It's a
Yeah.
machine. We don't care. We just like do this, do this, do that, like that. So that's kind of the summary of the reasons why we think that it's a lofty, lovely goal, and it makes sense from a design perspective. It's just not achievable now, and again, in anywhere in the lifetime of any project you might start today, because we're not even close to that.
So you hear this, and I've heard it. I can't remember who said it first. I think I heard somebody on Brent Kinsella's the Voice about AI podcast say it originally, but I wish I remember who it was because I could give him credit. But the phrase that they used was we're sort of transitioning from this time where we teach people how to use machines to a time where now we're teaching machines, how to work with people. And not, I like that idea, and I like the visual, but maybe it's somewhere in between at this point in the game.
Well, the thing is what a lot of people don't really understand how AI works. I think, well, let's give it a whole bunch of data and we'll magically come up with the optimized solutions. The problem is all of the AI algorithms we have, which are not really that advanced. They're pretty simple. Here's a bunch of stuff, and here's whether that was right or not. Okay, you need not just to try a bunch of things, but you also need a good metric to tell you whether they're right or not, and then the computer can make decisions of that. AI is very good at finding distinctions in your differences. Sorry, you're very good at finding differences in data sets. It's not always good at working at that. It's a good distinction. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's like by saying, okay, we want to find really good authors from really bad authors, and they might come up and say, okay, I found this great metric. It's really easy to do. All the good authors have a vowel as the second letter of their last name, and it's like it may be true, but it's probably not. In the same sense that computers need a lot of help to get there. Okay, and you got a lot of people, and a lot of universities spending a lot of money working on that. Now that's great. Okay, but we're still a long way from that being in a consumer product. Okay, so we need something in between. Okay, the Klingon battle speech is one method to that, but what I would really like to see more discussion around is, okay, what's something less than full human speech that we can move towards that will get us closer to that without this crazy false goal of being all the way there. If you remember back to like early text adventure games,
Mm-hmm.
okay, a lot of the ones like, the early ones were like had, verb noun.
Zork and Oregon
Right.
Trail and those.
Hit goblin, and they were very simple, but that gave a certain amount of thing. And later ones, when Lambda Moo is one I was very fond of, that you could develop things around, and I think is an excellent model for voice stuff. Had a very precise, because it was dynamically extendable, like we want voice to be, and you had this whole, well, all commands will be either verb, or they'll be verb direct object, or they'll be verb direct object preposition, indirect object. Okay, and that is actually very expressive.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff you can do with that, okay? And you got context because you've got your object and your direct and indirect objects and things like that. It's not full speech, but it's still very expressive, and it's more than kind of what we have now, where it's either something simple or we're trying to, encapsulate the entire of human language into some recognizable utterances.
Yeah, that's a really great thought. So it's kind of in my mind, I'm thinking sort of the voice equivalent of what the iPhone did with screen, pinch and zoom, and and all these gestures that prior to that were completely foreign, and we had to learn. Oh, look, now you can pinch and you can zoom and hold and swipe and and all of these new things. So kind of a new interface language, I suppose, or
it's precisely where we need to go. I'm a little older, and I tend to use the example of Windows 3.1, which was not a big step from Windows 3.0, but it produced a style guide that said you shall have a menu across the top of the screen. You shall have the help shall be the last one, file shall be the first one, and file open will do this, and a dialog box looks like. It came up with standards, and when everybody followed the standards, once you learned run program, you kind of knew a lot about them. Those standards are still emerging for voice. I mean, we've proposed a few, and that's what the talk we gave in Berlin talked about a few of those, and people kind of like that, but we really need to get consensus and really discover what they are. This is where design is very important, and designers are very important here, but they have to get past they have to understand the limitations and find out what design is going to work to those limitations.
Maybe we can go through like one or two simple examples and illustrate it. I'm very intrigued by this and the talk that you gave in Berlin. I mean, so the short version, I guess I know that's a long talk, but can you give me some examples? And
I can give you one example. The one that actually, the simplest one was the one that people were most responsive to, and we call it the beep.
Okay.
And it's something that's totally trivial. When you think about it, you're saying, wow, that's like, but the best stuff is going to be and appear to be told you. The thing is, you can only present so much information in a voice thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. Once you're past 2 or 3 sentences, it gets extremely tedious. Okay. Yeah. So most people's reaction is to only give that much. It's like, okay, pick your best stuff and just give that. Well, the problem is there may be more that the user wants, or you may have picked the wrong things. Unless you say, oh, say more for more information, the user doesn't have access to it. Okay. And that's also just as another sentence which takes away from your attention span budget. Okay. So what we did in our apps, and I think Six Swords is the first one to do this, we introduced the beep. So that when you're using the app, we might have, because it's like you want to look around you, we had like 30 or 40 things we could tell the user. Okay, and I'm like, we can't do that. We can only do a couple of these. How do we decide which of them? So what we did is we prioritized them and said, okay, well, here are the important ones. Let's tell them a couple of ones. And then we want the whole say more for more information. But what we do is we start off and say, oh, by the way, the first time it happens, at the end of this message, you're going to hear a little beep. And we go, beep. And they say, that means you can say more for info. Try it now. It goes, beep. And and again, we have a stage thing where we say this and then we don't say it for a while and we say it and we slowly tail off so that the user becomes trained so that when they hear something and they hear a beep at the end of it, oh, I can say more. And I mean, I can do a quick demo, I think.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Alexa, open Six Swords. This little kid one.
Welcome to Six Swords. Around you is prairie. The road you have been following goes east. There is a hamlet of Litherheath here. There is a signpost here.
More.
The signpost points east to hamlet of Dangarnon and west to hamlet of Glossop.
More.
You are in Green Prairie. You are at 0 degrees 9 minutes south latitude and 0 degrees 9 minutes east longitude.
More.
To the north you can see plains. Off to the south you can see plains. Eastward is plains. Westward is plains.
More.
The weather is pleasant. Little puffy clouds fill the sky.
Yeah.
More. It just keeps going.
Yeah. I love
it. Like a dog drifts overhead.
It's got little Easter eggs and stuff like that in
it. Yeah, I love that.
So you could use it. Who are my companions?
We're done. But
you can only hire people in a guild hall in a town.
You can edit it out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that was a whole bunch of information. But again, if they're just like, I'm just going north, they say north, goes blah, 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 beep. And you just keep going. You give the next command. But if you want something, and you can explain, like you can ask about your party, and there's all this different stuff. And if you really want to drill down to something, you can do that. But as long as it's something you want to do seldom, it's okay to bury it. So it's a mixture in a sense of that you keep it terse, you keep it informative, but you still give them access to all the information you could. And this is an excellent example of what we talked about, trying to push it as far as we can. Because you push it a certain distance, you work out, we can't say too much. And like, well, how do we get past that? And that's where we came up with the beep. And that's free, downloadable. Anybody wants to use that particular tone is welcome to, you know, catching on and other people using it. That's how I think we develop these sort of common uses. So somebody hears it in a different skill, they're like, oh, I know what that means.
Yeah, what I really liked about that is the user doesn't necessarily need to understand how to use it before using the skill the first time, because the skill teaches the user. You know, so it really is kind of the or it feels like anyway the right compromise. I don't know if that's the right word, but where if we are moving to this day where computers learn how to interact with humans, maybe we're not quite there, but maybe we are to a place where the computers can teach us, you know, what we need to do to work more efficiently with them without us going through. You remember the old computer-based training days where we put the CD in and, you know, like go through the whole course. But in this case, just like you just showed us, the skill can teach us how to use the skill.
Yeah.
And that's that's pretty neat. What are some of the challenges, the design patterns? We were talking about design patterns, which right now, for anybody that's watching that is in the software world, they're probably familiar with the term design patterns, and these are kind of generally accepted ways of going at common design challenges and architecting software. And there's right ways to do things and also common wrong ways that things get done, which anti-patterns, I think, is the term. And those really haven't been established. I've talked to a number of people that are really interested in the topic and thinking about these things, but there aren't established design patterns for voice that I know of, but I know that you're working on some of them. Maybe you could share a couple of thoughts on that and one or two specific design patterns that you see happening frequently.
Well, when most people think of this, they're thinking about the application itself. Okay, and how do we do so? And you can say that the beep is a design pattern. I mean, they're going to be different than for other things. A lot of people try to map the GUI straight onto this, and it doesn't really work that way. We don't even really know quite what the widgets in our library are going to be. I think they're going to be more techniques, and that's an example of one of them for an application. Another example is, as you said, one of the things we have is this contextual decreasing prompting, where when somebody does something, we say, okay, well, what are they likely to do next? And have they ever done it before? And if they haven't, we prompt them with a suggestion about doing that. And we like the beep for the more. It's like, oh, well, we want to play a beep, but we've never beeped them before, so let's tell them about it first, and then keep track of that and degrade it over time. And the same, it's like, it's like, oh, you meet somebody. It's like, oh, well, if you want to see who's in your party, you can say, inventory or who or whatever like that. So, that's kind of another pattern for an application. Another pattern, again, that we, one I think of the more powerful ones we came up with, I think has a lot of potential, something we called a method of Loci, okay, which is, the idea is, it goes back to a Roman, I've just been reading about Carthage, so I'm going to say Scipio or Cato, but I don't think it is. I think it was, I can't remember. Came up with this method.
I couldn't call you out on it, so you could say anything.
Yeah, look up method of Loci in Wikipedia, or memory palace.
Okay.
It's used by memorizers to memorize large amounts of information. And the idea is you picture in your mind this beautiful palace that's huge and has lots of halls and rooms and cabinets and just this intricate geography. And the idea is you go to a particular point in there and you put a memory, and it's supposed to be really good at being able to go back to the point and then remembering what it was. So in voice, what we tried to do, our challenge was we wanted to, like Amazon has a service called Poly, there's a guy who ran something called Tailstreamer for a while, had all these different voices, all these different pitches and speeds, and we wanted to give users the ability to change their experience by making these settings. But there was way too many of them to prompt the person with and say, well, would you like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or, it's just, you can't do that. So instead, what we did is we created a geography to represent this, okay? Now, Fortunately, Six Swords is a fantasy adventure game. It already had a geography built in. The user already knows to go north, south, east, west. So we just added in big towns, you could find a bardic college. Okay. And when you went into it, it's like, hi, we will train your voice. If you go east, we will train, there are the pitch trainers. To the north are the accent coaches. To the east are, the speed coaches, whatever. You might go north, and it's like, okay, we got lots of people ready to train your accent here. We got female accents to the east and male accents to the west. And you go into there, and it's like, oh, well, we have, and essentially it's a rooms, and you navigate that until you pick a voice, and that is how you pick your voice. Then it's like, oh, okay, and you can walk back and go in somewhere else and pick a pitch, and essentially by navigating around there, you essentially make your selections for this complicated setting. Now, it isn't really different conceptually from a bunch of menus you're going through, okay, but portraying it as a geography makes it much more memorable. Because then you're like, our brains are good at that because I guess it was a survival trait, whatever. So we're like, oh, right, I know now. I'm going to the Bardic College. I go straight ahead a bit, and to the left, and then north 2 rooms, and then I'll find the one I want. And it's easy for me to remember that, okay? And to walk back and go through the menu. It's much better than our teleprompts where you press 1, 2, 3, 4 or star to go back, and nobody remembers that. It's like all over the place. So you can use this for lots of things. We used it, in a game in a fantasy setting or stuff like this, but you could equally use it for, oh, you have a problem? Well, let's take you to customer support. You're in the customer support office. There's a desk to the north. There's, you can give them, and again, with a restricted vocabulary, because we don't want to add too much vocabulary to something because that has its own problems, which is an audio design pattern, which I can talk about in a bit if we have time for it. So we don't want too many verbs in there, but we have just north, south, east, west gives us a complicated thing that we can navigate through. We can portray the different things to capture the user's intent in this way that is easy. You don't have to train them. They understand, oh, I'm in a place and I can go these 4 directions. Got it. And they can remember how to get back there and to get to where they want to go within that sort of space. So we think this has a lot of potential. And that there's, and again, it's one of these pushing the boundary. It's like, well, how do we add this level of complexity to a simplistic interface? This is one method we've come up with, a pattern, a design, I'm going to call it that, for adding consumable complexity to something.
Yeah. So do you think that we'll get to the point just naturally where these things are defined because they work and then published, and they sort of become the library that everybody references on how to do things the right way, and sort of that combined with the idea that we'll come up with a common language, I suppose, or subset of words and verbs and things that people recognize. Is that how we, is that how we get to that right balance between the systems just naturally understanding like a human would, and us getting frustrated by systems that feel like phone trees?
Well, a couple of things there. One, I don't think we know how we're going to get there yet, but I think that's a good step. It's like one of the, like I said, we talked in Berlin, and and Jovo also presented there, and coming out of that, I'm like, we should try to wrap some of these things, these patterns, into modules that you can add to your Jovo application. Okay, and that would be one way. It gets towards having some libraries to do some of these things, and if they're already done there and they're freely available for people to use, we can build conventions and build consistency, which makes it training a lot easier across different applications. So that, I think, is a good next step. As far as getting to talking to it like a human, it's like I said, I'm not even sure that's right. When I use a command line prompt on the computer, I'm not writing a letter. I'm not writing sentences.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not an efficient way of getting what I want done on it. So I'm not personally convinced that talking to it like a human is really the end design goal. Okay, the end design goal, I mean, if we take a step back, what do the designers say we want? We want something the human doesn't have to be trained on, that they can relate to, and then they can use easily. That's what we want. The question then becomes how do we get there? Naively, human language would get us there, but there may be other routes that get us there. Like people open up an app on their desktop, be it Windows or Mac. Everybody now knows file menus and stuff like this, or the new ribbon bars or things like that. It's like, because it has become pervasive, that problem has been solved. So that might be another route to solving this. If these voice patterns become pervasive and anybody who's used it kind of knows about this, like, well, then we've solved the problem without necessarily solving these really, really tough technical problems. But you know, to your point about how we speak to people, I watch my kids when they use the voice assistant, and it's like and that makes me watch myself, and like I have my my Alexa voice or my Google Home voice. It's like it's Alexa, and I speak clearly and directly, and again I watch them do it, and it's almost like they're like their facial expression doesn't change because they've learned it doesn't know that, it doesn't care about that, so they have a way of talking to it which is different than how they talk to a human. So going on both sides.
I think it's a tool. I mean, I think it's a tool. I think it's it's interesting to watch people and hear how they how they relate to it, and but I think it's just what it intrigues me is it's a tool. My mother is 84 years old, and this is a way for her to do things that when you're looking at a screen, and your eyes aren't as good as they used to be, and you're not as good at manipulating with your hands anymore, to be able to say something like, Alexa, remind me at this time to do this thing. Those little things are really really valuable, and that's a really simple use case. But there's lots of simple use cases that when you see them being used day to day are really, really valuable, and can change the lives of people, and in some cases are minimally just make life a lot easier where it's applied right. Do you think that I've been, like, I know you like around the tech stuff for most of my adult life, and got in early on in the .com days, and remember those early days when you had to detect, is this Netscape Navigator or Internet Explorer, and literally like display a completely different page for each one to make it work. And to your point, like all that stuff's come together. But one of the differences that I'm realizing with this stuff is, when we're designing for visual stuff, I could very easily get teams to collaborate from anywhere and anywhere, because when you show somebody a picture, the experience is really easy to communicate. Like, this is what the page is going to look like, and we'd have designers that would design it really beautifully, and then technical people that would figure out how to make that design render the right way. What's unique about voice, though, is there's really no equivalent to that. So we've got a team that's spread out, around the world, and different offices and different locations. And I can't say, okay, here's the script for the voice app, and hand it to them and expect that it's going to come back as something that's going to impress a client. And this is, this is something that I'm gonna be really, I'm interested in hearing your opinion on it, and I'm gonna be interested in seeing how this all unfolds, because you said earlier that really what we need is more designers, and I'm scratching my head and going, I'm not sure. Like, designers are a part of it, but understanding the technical context, and the capabilities across systems is equally as important, because you can't just design without that understanding also. Because if you do that, and we've tried that, we get people that really understand language but need a lot more time understanding the platform as well. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying, okay, but I actually, I'm so famous where I disagree. You've read my book, okay? You probably know my answers. Like, what we recommended in my book was actually scripts, but not a script, okay? What we suggest as the best design, because people ask me, oh, what's a good design tool? Should I do flow? And people are in intricate flow charts and stuff like that. And we don't recommend that. We recommend a script, like a movie script, a dialogue, okay? Yeah. That what we suggest in my book is at the design process, what it should be is like, come up with an interactive script. It's like, okay, you say this, the computer says this, you say this, the computer says this, and you walk through a use case, a scenario. You do a bunch of them. Okay, and the idea is that what you're doing is you're producing a spec, okay, of desired behavior, okay, so that, okay, well, and if you want it to do different things, instead of doing a flowchart, you do multiple scripts, okay, because each of them shows the context and the entirety from the beginning to the end of the conversation. So if there's going to be multiple routes, you got to have multiple scripts for that. And you build up a book of these things, okay?
Mhm.
An advantage of that approach is that you don't have to be technical, okay? Your marketing people can do it. Your people doing it, maybe not sales, but yeah, your marketing are the people exploring the customer context. Your designers, the people who are subject matter experts, okay, can say, okay, yeah, this is how I want to see it work, okay? And if you got to do a multiple of these and they're rigorous, it kind of stops you going in the Jarvis direction, because it's like, okay, well, let's kind of slim this down. And yeah, a certain amount of domain knowledge is handy, okay, but a lot of it can be reduced. When I talk to our UX designers for the product I'm working on, I tell them, I remember I had this conversation when I said, well, what about this? Like, they said, well, I don't know how you'd implement that. I'm like, that's not your problem. Design the best experience you can, and I'll worry. If I have, if I decide the implementation is too difficult and I have to dumb it down, I will come back to you and we'll do it. But I don't want you to be restrained by that first. So in the same sense, we like to see people come up with scripts, kick it around between management, show it to the customers. It's much easier to edit that than some sort of demo or something like that. You don't have to be technical. You can come up with this stuff. The next stage is to send that to somebody and say, okay, well, let's look through all of this and let's try to regularize it. Okay, what are the common interactions here? Where you can try to synthesize a flowchart from that if you want, but the idea is that the script is preeminent. That's your design tool, not the flowchart. Flowchart is just a way to try to take and capture that design into something that can be implemented. Okay, but from that you can work out what are the types. You can come up with your intent model based on the type of responses there. You can come up, you're going to use the state machine to implement this. What are the states you need to kind of represent the transitions they go through, et cetera, like that. And that's, again, if you take that approach, you also have a built-in set of tests. Because now you can take your app and you say, okay, let's walk through this dialogue. Now, first of all, in the early days, before you take all the weird branches, you have something that's quickly demoable to the customer in a way that is relatable. It's like if they worked with you on the script, you can go through it, and your first pass, it should be able to do exactly what's in each of these scripts.
The happy
And
path,
you can
right?
go into the other ways, and it ends up with like a set of unit tests or regression tests that, as you add other things to it, the basic ones you came up with should still work. I mean, at some point you're going to go from that into little sort of different departures and things like that. But I see it as a good first step. And a lot of the apps we produce have started that way. I've been sitting there, it's like, and I start writing down some conversations until I generally get my head around how the thing is going to work. I got my basic structures, the basic idea of interaction. Then, you can go off script, literally, and add other little things to it.
Yeah, and we follow that process because of your book too. So by the way, like that's how I started doing it, is just almost like you're writing a play or storyboard. Like you break it down. It's not a flow chart.
Yeah.
It's a story. Back and forth. Hey Joe, I really appreciate you sharing your time with us. If someone wants to reach out to you, how can they find you, and where can I send them?
I spend way too much time on Slack, so I'm easy to find there. It's, I think, Alexa Dev.
AlexaSlack.com.
Something it will magically appear when you edit this.
I'll add the link.
Because I just go there.
AlexaSlack.com, I think. Yeah.
That's a good place to find me. If you search for TsaTsaTzu, TsaTsaTzu, you can find it on the web, and there's contact things there like that. But, I'm
awesome.
happy to answer questions. I've loved talking to you. I like providing my opinions, because I think what we need is a lot of diverse opinions out there. I have a lot of them, but I encourage to hear other people's opinions, because we need to know where to go in this. And the more people we have thinking about it, the more light gets shined on it, and like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, like I said, I've always been impressed and aware of the fact that you spend a lot of brain cycles thinking about this stuff. There's no question about it. So again, appreciate your time, and we will look forward to. I know we've got a couple of other things that we're going to be putting on the Dabble Lab channel that you're graciously allowing us to post. So that'll be coming in the days and weeks ahead. And if anybody has any questions, you can leave those in the comments here, and we'll respond just as quickly as we can. This is a new format, so if there's anything that we can do to make it better, please let us know. And with that, I will say thanks again, Joe, and we'll sign off for this one.